Welcome everyone to the premiere episode of the Really Big Fan Pod. I am your host ChZuck. I'm joined by my co-host ACRONYM.
Hello, hello.
And this is our first episode of a podcast we've been talking about for months, pretty much since the previous podcast that I was doing, Nerd Radio, ended. We were talking about doing something like this, but kind of broadening the horizons a little bit. And here we are. How you feeling this morning?
Doing pretty good. I'm really excited to kick this off. We kept going like, okay, so when are we starting? When are we starting?
Yeah.
When are we starting? And it's just like, we just need to start it or else it's never going to start.
Yeah,
so here we are.
We need to get the car rolling and like let it fall apart a few times and put it back together.
Both a little bit on the perfectionist side of wanting things to be perfect. So it's hard to hit launch, but as my buddy from Jim at Remote Start Podcast says, you just have to start it. It doesn't have to be perfect.
Right.
Just get it started.
Right. And so, yeah, this, like I said before we started, there'll probably be some growing pains in these first couple episodes, but the basic structure, I believe, is there. And that is what we'll go into right now. It's the Really Big Fan Podcast. It's a podcast about stuff that we and people that we talk to on the show are really big fans about. So, obviously, all the old nerd radio stuff we'll still talk about, professional wrestling and video games and comic books, what's on Netflix or Disney Plus, that kind of thing. But then we're going to dive into a whole bunch of stuff, whether it's like music or cosplay or even sports. I'd really love to get my buddy at the comic store who's been a Lions fan the whole time, his entire life. I'd love to sit down with him and talk about like what is that experience like.
And I'm definitely going to be diving into this as far as he said music-wise, being that I'm a music journalist. There's going to be a couple different things that I want to bring to the podcast as well, like some music updates. But when we talk to people about being really big fans, we also are opening it up to people who are really into music. We've got some fans that are like really into U2, and we want to understand why.
There's there's obviously everyone's a really big fan of at least one particular band, but then there's people who are big fans of genre.
Exactly.
And that'll be interesting to talk about as well. So here's what you can expect from the Really Big Fan Podcast. We're going to kick the show off. We're going to talk about some headlines going on in the world of all the stuff that we're interested in and discuss that. Then we'll get into an interview segment where we'll talk about one particular topic. And then we'll wrap the show up by letting you know where you can follow us and support us online, as well as what is the thing this particular week that's kind of giving us a hit of, is it serotonin?
Yeah, the serotonin boost.
The serotonin boost. Okay, cool. So yeah, let's get started. Let's hit those headlines. Start at the top. We've got a couple of trailers that hit in the last couple of days for Marvel properties that we're super excited about. I know Sunday night we were sitting on the couch and they dropped the Secret Invasion trailer. It's the next Disney Plus show that's going to have Sam Jackson as Nick Fury, Colby Smulders as Maria Hill, and Emilia Clarke as a character that is yet to be named.
Yeah, that's really interesting that they don't have her name listed on her IMDb of what she's playing, but she's in it.
Yeah,
so we'll see.
Makes me think it's one of those characters that, like, if we knew the name, then we would immediately have context of, like, oh, that means something.
Yep, start digging.
Yeah. So it'll be very fascinating. What did you think of the trailer?
I'm excited. It's going to be interesting to see how a Marvel property fares without having a super involved.
Yeah.
Because Nick Fury is not exactly a super.
No.
He's involved with supers. Then you've got, some of the other team, the SHIELD team or the defunct SHIELD team at this point, being involved in it. And I have a feeling this will probably lead into Thunderbolts, especially with Julia Louis-Dreyfus's character being part of that and her being sort of the new Nick Fury, but with nefarious things going on. So I assume that she's probably going to pop up at some point, even though she's not in the trailer, I don't think.
No, she wasn't. But I mean, she's kind of been, she's, like you said, she's the new Nick Fury. She's showing up in, like, after-credit sequences and in different shows to kind of put together the Thunderbolts.
Yeah, so it's kind of one of those things where I feel like it's going to be a jumping off point to something, and it'll be interesting to see how people react to that because of the fact that, if you don't have a soup in there,
Yeah.
I'm like using the boys talk, but if you don't have a soup in there, that's going to derail some people from being interested. But as Marvel has shown, most of these things connect somehow. So
Sure.
you're going to want to watch it regardless.
Yeah, and the Secret Invasion obviously will not follow the Secret Invasion crossover storyline that happened almost 10 years ago now in the comic books. But that did have a lot of super people in it that were Skrulls, so it'll be interesting to see how it translates. It also feels like this might be the last Sam Jackson Marvel thing.
He says it was like one more thing, like he says something
Outside
to
of,
the effect of one more, and so I think it
like
is.
voice acting for What If or something like that. I think this might be the last Sam Jackson live action Marvel thing.
I mean, you don't think he'll pop up in Captain Marvel? Because he's an
know.
integral character to the Captain Marvel story.
Yeah, I don't know.
So it might be one of those like
That movie's really packed though.
yeah.
It's got Miss Marvel in it. It's got Photon in it. It's like there's gonna be a lot of
Well,
moving
yeah,
parts in that
but
movie.
it seems like still like because he was such a main character in the other one, if he doesn't at least have a cameo, I would be shocked.
Right.
Now, when does Secret Invasion come out?
I think it's in June.
When does Miss Marvel come out, or the Marvels?
August, maybe
Okay.
the fall.
Okay,
So it's
one
months
is
away.
one. Okay, I thought maybe one came before the other, but
Yeah.
that shot my idea to shit.
Well, and they've been shuffling things around for the last couple of years too. So I'm sure they've had to kind of pump the brakes on making things directly connected.
Yeah,
Because suddenly when you suddenly start shuffling around your release schedule, then it's like, okay, well, we can't have this scene in this thing because then it blows this thing that was supposed to be released after it.
well, that's what's going to make it kind of messy. Because if you listen to the former podcast, you know that I am very adamant that the Marvel stuff works the best when it's connected. And so for me, when it doesn't connect, I'm kind of like, what is the point of this?
Yeah, but at the same time, like if you overconnect stuff, then
It's true.
That's when it gets super messy.
Yeah.
It's better to leave it a little bit vague, but then kind of connect it. And speaking of connecting, the other thing that dropped last night was the Spider-Verse trailer.
Yeah, that looked really good as well.
Yeah, did you watch it?
Yeah. So my question with that is, and I think I've asked you this before, but like, 2099 is evil,
No.
or is he like coded to be a gray area villain? Because he seems very aggressive.
He does. He seems kind of anti-heroish, like, say, the Punisher or Venom in this particular movie. But I feel like once we see the movie, we will see that you can even see in the trailer, like, he's got a reason
Yeah.
to be that way. Not to, spoil anything for anybody who hasn't seen the trailer, but lots of Easter eggs of different spider people, blink and you'll miss it kind of stuff. And there's even a reference to Tom Holland.
Yes, there is. There's a reference to all three, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that'll be interesting to see. I was really happy that the music bed of the trailer was Blackway's What's Up Danger.
Yeah.
Like, because being that was part of the first soundtrack, I thought that would get abandoned, but I feel like it's become so integral to that character.
That's just Miles'
They're just like,
theme
that's
song.
Miles' theme song now is the What's Up Danger.
Yep.
Every time I hear that song, too, I see him doing that inverted jump off the
backflip.
building. I'm like, oh my God,
It's
that's
the best
such...
part. It's the best part of the movie. I mean, it's a great movie. Anyways.
I've got
It's the best part.
chills.
Yeah, same here.
My hair is standing up on my arms.
That's just because you turned the air conditioning on because it's warm.
I did. It's
today.
really toasty in here. We have lights on in here, and we had to lock the cats out of the office.
Right.
So one is screaming. If you can hear him in the distant audio, it's because he's very upset we're both in here.
Something else I wanted to bring up: the Dungeons and Dragons movie Honor Among Thieves came out this past weekend and was #1 at the box office. $38.5 million. Topped John Wick.
Yeah, I heard that people were really happy about that. People not so happy about the Super Mario movie.
Yeah, which comes out I think this week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Somebody said it's no good.
Oh no!
That was the caption I saw on one of the critics things. So we'll
Huh.
see if it actually is good. I'm sure we'll go see it at
I'm
some point.
I can't
Or-
imagine it's like terrible.
Yeah,
Like,
it can't be the worst
just
movie
looking
ever.
at the trailers. Like there's a kart racing part. There's Donkey Kong in it. Like I feel like it's.
Jet Black is in it. It can't be that bad.
I feel like people that are gonna dog on it had way too high of expectations of, and like, how do you have high, like, super expectations of like the movie about Super Mario Brothers, man?
My expectations were shot the minute they cast Chris Pratt.
A lot of people.
So I'm like,
people.
and it's not to say. I think our friend of the show Al Beck at one point said like, well, that's a double-edged sword because if you cast someone that is of Italian descent.
Yeah.
Like that, you have that, but then it's not the guy that did the voice before who's still functioning and active.
Right.
Like, why wouldn't you do that? So, like, no matter what they had done, it probably wouldn't have gone well. I just wouldn't have gone with Chris Pratt, but, you know.
They should have just got, it wasn't Al Pacino. Who was the other guy in Heat? Robert De Niro. They should have just got Robert De Niro. It's Mario.
No, now I just want Pedro Pascal.
Yeah, Pedro Pascal.
I want to feel big.
It's all the things.
If you have not watched his SNL Mario spoof, you need to. It is amazing.
It was really good. Really good. Switching over to gaming, you're the one that turned me onto this, but next week, the Nintendo online service for their Nintendo 64 emulator gets Pokemon Stadium on April 12th, which is kind of a mixed bag because that was the game on the Nintendo 64 that came with the thing that you could hook to the controller and then put your Pokemon Game Boy game in and use those Pokemon. And obviously there's no way to emulate that. So you're just going to have to use whatever stock Pokemon are in the game. But hey, Pokemon Stadium. That's pretty cool.
I still think it'll be awesome. I wish that they would somehow be able to integrate it with your Nintendo account to where you could pull either your Pokemon Go or your Pokemon Unite Pokemon into that.
Maybe
that would be wild.
Maybe
but
that'll be the next
update.
Like huge thing because they introduced the Game Boy and the Game Boy Advance. Like if they figure out a way to eventually stick the original Pokemon game on the Game Boy app and make it connective to the Nintendo 64 app, so you can translate that over. Maybe I don't know. That's a pipe dream. I don't know. That's plus the fact that's the thing that's weird about Pokemon games too is that all the old Pokemon games are hyper expensive in the secondary market.
Yep.
And it's the kind of thing they're hyper expensive because Nintendo doesn't like re-release or reissue those things, but I don't understand like why wouldn't you? Like why do you care that the secondary market is that good? Because Nintendo's not making any money on that. Like it's all third party, it's all me and you exchanging money and goods that they already made money on 2 decades ago.
I'm sure it's probably a let's move forward, not stay in the past situation.
I guess.
Because, like, they're going to want to push things that are on the Nintendo Switch, right? And they're going to want to push more games that are for that.
Oh, for sure.
They're going to add more things to the service to incentivize people to get on that service. You know, there's a lot of different avenues for that instead of just, like, you know, selling stuff back and forth or having a market for reissues and stuff like that. Because, I mean, let's face it, if they were going to be doing that, they'd probably really be pushing the Wii hard because they never made their money from that.
That's fair. Yeah, well, I mean, when the Switch started, they did put out a lot of games that were on the Wii U first.
Yeah.
And just kind of redid them. So.
Well, and for good reason.
Speaking of Pokemon 2, this weekend, if you've got Pokemon Scarlet and what's the other one? Lavender. We don't have it.
we don't have it.
But they're doing a Perfect Ditto raid starting April 7th, my birthday. From 7 p.m. until April 9th all weekend, there's a raid where you can get yourself a Ditto who's level 75 and has all his stats are rated best. So they're perfect for breeding to get the best stats on whatever other Pokemon you want.
I didn't know you could breed Dittos.
You can, and the weird part is Dittos do not have a sex.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying.
They breed with everything.
That's weird.
It's very
Dittos
strange.
are pansexual. Got it.
Right. Absolutely.
I am a Ditto. See, I'm not a gremlin. I'm a Ditto. Oh, my God.
I don't know. You don't, like, transform into the opposing Pokemon like a Ditto. So
that's true.
All right. The last thing I wanted to present to you is a story I saw this morning on Kotaku. A collector of Funko Pops traded some rare Funko Pops for over $150,000 in Cadillacs.
So he got more than one?
He had, yes. So he had these Funkos that are called Freddy Venom. I don't understand because I'm not in Funko Pops. I don't understand what Freddy, but it's like this Freddy character in a Venom costume. And there were apparently only 24 or 25 of these made. So they're one of like the holy grails of Funko Pop.
Right.
And he traded, let me look through the story here. I think he traded 4 of them for 2 Cadillac Escalades.
So then you flipped the Cadillacs, right? After that?
I don't know.
I would assume that's how you do that. You keep one, you flip one.
So on a Facebook trading group, he was looking to unload 6 more Freddy Venoms for around $240,000 or 2 Cadillac Escalades.
And somebody legitimately gave him 2
Somebody
Cadillac.
legitimately gave him 2 Cadillac Escalades. Apparently, before this, he did 2.5 Frenums for a $70,000 GMC Yukon. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he's just a car collector. He's just like...
Yeah, but a GMC Yukon is really not that special. I can understand maybe like Cadillacs,
right.
but like I would still be flipping every car at that point. Like,
so yeah,
this is the Szechuan sauce for the car situation, which I know that person, by the way.
Oh, the Szechuan sauce guy?
No, I know the person that traded the car.
For the Szechuan sauce?
Yes.
Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. All right, well, that's going to do it for the headlines. We're going to take a little break here, and then we're going to come back with the interview segment. Today's guest is me.
Yeah.
You're going to interview me about something I'm very passionate about, Transformers. So stay tuned. The Really Big Fan Podcast returns. Back with the Really Big Fan Podcast. I am ChZuck, your host, along with your second host, your co-host, your I don't have any good
Gremlin.
Your Gremlin acronym. And so this is our interview segment of the Really Big Fan Podcast, where we talk to somebody about something they're a really big fan about. And we figured for the first couple episodes, we just interview each other. That'd be cool. So for the first episode, I will hand you the reins, and you can take it away.
All right. Well, we will get started here with, first of all, tell us, when did you start? What was your first exposure to Transformers?
The Transformers? Probably the cartoon. Probably when I was growing up, when the cartoon was on the. We were just talking the other night about how, like, used to be here in Michigan, where we are, like, it was Channel 20 and Channel 50 would play syndicated cartoons, like in the mornings before you went to school, and then in the afternoons when you got home from school, Monday through Friday. And the Transformers cartoon was one of those ones they played in the afternoon, at like 3 or 4 in the afternoon, Monday through Friday. And I probably saw that and saw the cars turning into robots and jets turning into robots and punching each other in the face, and was like, well, that's neat. I want to see more about that. And then obviously the toys were everywhere and exploded. But what really, really sunk its teeth into me was the comic books, which is funny because I wasn't really a comic book kid until my teenage years. But I remember getting a pack of comics at Toys R Us that was the first 3 issues of Transformers. And I took those everywhere with me and read them probably a million times, and like drew the Transformers from the comics and stuff. And that was and then for the longest time, whenever Mom would take me to like 7-Eleven or even eventually a comic book store, it was so I could get Transformers comics. I wasn't even looking at other stuff until probably like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It was just Transformers all the way.
So which 3 characters did you first gravitate toward?
So the first dude I ever had as a toy was Cliff Jumper, and he was essentially, he transforms exactly the same as Bumblebee, but he's a different character in a different car, and he's red, Bumblebee's yellow. And I don't remember if I specifically asked for Cliff Jumper or if Mom got me Cliff Jumper and I'd wanted Bumblebee. But yeah, Cliff Jumper was my first dude. And ironically enough, so the way the toys worked, they look like little penny racers, the original dudes, and the original small ones, like Bumblebee and Cliff Jumper. And there was a third guy that was made in the Japanese line over in Japan that wasn't supposed to be part of the line. And the car looked like the Cliff Jumper car, but he was yellow. And eventually fans named him Bumper. He was actually the first guy I got.
Oh.
It was like I think it was on a Cliff Jumper card, but he was yellow. So maybe Mom did get him thinking that's Bumblebee.
Yeah, probably.
And I had Bumper for the longest time and had no idea why my Cliff Jumper was yellow. Eventually I got a cassette that had like an audio drama, Transformers audio drama, that came with the actual Cliff Jumper. The red
nice.
Cliff Jumper, so I actually had him. What were my first 3 Transformers? So I had Cliff Jumper. I think I had another little guy that was called Wind Charger because he looked like a Trans Am, and my dad owned a white Trans Am. He was red though. So I think he was. And then who would have been probably Soundwave, the cassette player.
I love that one. That one's
Yeah,
cool.
because I've always been a huge fan of the ones that turn into like real life stuff. So like Megatron turns into a gun, and Soundwave is a cassette player kind of stuff. There was a Perceptor turned into a microscope that was kind of cool. So I always really like those guys.
So when you look at this stuff now, and it's been obviously many years and whatever,
Decades.
not trying to make you feel old,
Absolute
like,
decades.
but what is the draw for all of you guys? Unfortunately, I'm going to use the word middle aged.
Yes.
Wanting to still participate in this Transformers thing now, because now they market the toys more so to the adults.
Yes, that's a big part of it. Is that they understand that we are now. That they're the audience they have that has the most money are the people that grew up on this stuff. So if they can find ways to make new versions of characters we fell in love with when we were children, um, we will spend money on it, kind of
Right.
thing. To the point where there's the guy from the movie, the cartoon movie Unicron, the big planet that eats planets, kind of thing.
I think he's cool.
A couple of years ago, they made a Unicron that's literally about 3 feet tall, I think, or maybe even bigger, and was like $600, and they had to like, basically, like make it so that if enough people said I will buy one of those and paid for it in advance, they would make it.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. I can't crowdsource. They had to crowdsource it.
Yes.
And
yes.
they've tried doing that with other properties that the same company owns, like GI Joe or He-Man, and they haven't had as much success as they had with like, hey, if we give you a giant Transformer for almost $1,000, are you in? And Transformers, the Transformers fans with money are nuts.
Yes.
So they're like, not only am I in, I'll take 3.
Yeah.
And then they'll try and flip the other 2.
Right. That is a big thing too. To maybe bring to the viewers' attention is that there are actual like groups in which people will buy, sell, and trade these Transformers things. How many groups of those do you know of that exist?
It's a little bit like the Funko Pops we were talking about and the other thing where like it's its own secondary market. And it's another one of those things that I don't understand that why when Hasbro puts out a figure, like last year they put out a figure that was a Walmart exclusive and they made him one per case. And he was like $30, but the only way to get one was to pay somebody $60 or $90 online that got to the store way before you did and snapped up all of them because they were one per case. And I don't understand why when Hasbro sees that, like they're not making secondary market money, so why don't they just like make more of them? Kind of thing.
Yeah, it's interesting that they'll only pack like one per case or something like that. And it's also interesting. I'm sure it happens with other toys. I'm not exactly like a collector of anything in particular.
Yeah. Largely for the longest time, it was the girls. If there was a girl action figure, like in GI Joe, if there was a girl, or if in Transformers, there would be one or two like girl Transformers. They were always one per case, and it was always because, well, this is a boy's toy, and we're not going to sell a lot of these.
Yeah. But it's not like you're getting that with like an RC. It's not like it's RC is the only one that's in that case.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's also interesting to me, and like I said, where I was kind of ramping up to the whole thing with like buying and collecting toys or figurines or stuff like that. Like, how many toys or figurines do you know of that have store exclusives? Because I'm not really like, I know Funko does. There's certain ones that do.
Some of them will too. It's become a larger thing now that toy stores largely have gone away. Mm-hmm. It's become a larger thing for like Walmart, Target, Walgreens, surprisingly, will have exclusives from Hasbro. So whether it's a G.I. Joe character or a Transformers character, there's always like one Walgreens exclusive every year. But yeah, it's fascinating, and I think the other part of it that in addition to just being the nostalgia of like this is a thing I liked when I was a kid, is the puzzle aspect of it. Like I have to take this thing and then turn it into something else, and like you have to flip this and move this and almost like a Rubik's Cube to make him to take this truck and turn it into Optimus Prime. And there's something about that scratches a part of the brain that kind of stims you a little bit of like, I'll sit there. I've got a couple on my desk that I'll just sit there and transform from one mode to another and then stand up.
Yeah, I've seen you do that during the Limit Break Radio
The Super Universe?
where
Yeah.
he'll just sit there and he's clicking them away as he's commentating and yelling over Will and stuff like that.
Right.
So.
No, it's really part of the fun. It's I might not bash them together like a little kid, like bash them together in car mode or like make them fight or something like that, but just like setting them all up and being like, man, look at all those guys. And that's what I said back in 2000 when they started making what they call the Classics line, which is now Generations, where they were making new molds of the original characters. Is like when I was a kid, it was hard to talk mom into buying 6 of the same guy because they were different colors and they were all different characters. But now I'm an adult with my own money, so I'll buy all 6 of those jets because I know every one of their names and I know each of their characteristics.
I'll throw this out here now. We have an eBay store with ones that he's trying to unload.
It's true.
So, if you go into our acronymIs.com/realbigfanpod, we've got a revolving garage sale happening.
Yes,
and
our non-stop garage sale.
there are definitely figures in there. So I want to transition over to, or should I say transform,
Yes.
over to the movie aspect. So what was your reaction before the movie franchise came out with the live actions? How did you react to that? Did you have any reservations about it? Were you kind of not excited and you were like, well, let me figure this out. Let me see if it's good.
I think it's kind of like when Marvel started putting their first movies out and we didn't have an expectation yet of what to have. So every one of them, whether we liked them more than the others or not, we were like, how cool is it that we're getting this? And that's always been my thought process, even when we get like a bad X-Men movie or something, is like, how cool is it that I lived long enough to see the technology hit a point where an actual Camaro turns into Bumblebee, even if the designs look kind of weird. Like, I can't tell you, we were talking about getting chills talking about What's Up Danger. Like, the first time Optimus transforms in that first movie and Peter Cullen's voice comes out of him in the theater, booming through the speakers, just like, I still get chills thinking about it. It's just like, yes, Optimus Prime is real kind of thing. And I think as a kid, that was part of the appeal too, is that like, how when your parents are driving you somewhere and you'd like put your hand out the window and do the thing, or you'd imagine the guy jumping on all the houses, something like that. It's this kind of thing where like once they introduce to a young kid the idea that a car can turn into a robot, well, now every machine you look at, you start trying to figure out like, okay, there's where the legs would flip around, and there's where the arms would be, and that's where the head is, kind of thing. And it's fun.
Now, with the movies to the cartoons, was there any crossover other than with the robots and their personalities and designs? Was there any crossover between the Sam Witwicky story and anything else that was in the cartoons? Because like, I saw that 86 thing in pieces. I didn't see most of it. Like, I walked in the room and went, hey, Unicron's kind of cool, and walked back out.
So in the original cartoons, his name was Sam Witwicky.
Okay.
And he was supposed to be like the human character that was the friend of the Transformers, him and his dad.
Yes.
When the comic books came out, when the Marvel did the comic books, Sam Witwicky was their character. That way they had their version that they could control. And his dad was a mechanic, and he ends up finding Bumblebee and taking him after he gets hurt in a battle and can't transform from his VW bug mode to his dad to fix. And his dad gets under the hood and is like, this isn't a car. I've never seen anything like this. And eventually fixes him up, and then they befriend the Transformers and they go on their adventures. So it was neat as a fan primarily of the old Marvel comics when his name is Sam Witwicky to be like, that's a thing. That I know, kind of thing. And in later movies, you could see where Michael Bay was pulling from specific episodes of the cartoon.
Gotcha.
Specific plot lines, like bringing Cybertron to Earth in one of the later movies is like directly from one of the first cartoons.
So is the Bumblebee movie with Haley Steinfeld more accurate to the Bumblebee story? In that sense.
Yeah.
She's the mechanic.
For sure.
But she brings him back.
Yeah, and that the way that movie rolls, that plot feels much more lifted specifically from those old comics.
Gotcha.
That I had read.
Did Michael Bay direct that one too? No, I didn't think so.
No, that had a different director. But they're saying the next one, the one with the beasts in it, is in that continuity.
Oh, okay. That should be interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, you were interested in the beginning of that movie in particular because it showed a live action version of
Yes.
Cybertron falling,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah. Just seeing like 5 minutes of like the war on the Cybertron, and part of that too is the fact that when they translated Transformers to video games, the most successful ones and the ones I spent the most money or time on were all set on Cybertron during the war.
Gotcha.
So like that once again kind of scratches the itch of like, oh, that was my favorite video game, and now I'm getting to see in the movie in live action. It's funny because as a kid, the appeal is cars, like any machine around you could be a transformer and turn into a robot. But then after you've been into it for long enough, you start to drift away from like, yeah, it's cool that they come to Earth and they're in disguise and stuff like that, but like I want to see their planet. I want to see what that's all about. And that's where the later comics from like maybe the last like 10, 20 years that IDW did like really focused on like, what if the Autobots win the war? What happens next? And they all go back to Cybertron, and then they had two different comics. One was focusing on like the religion of of this alien species that can transform itself, and another one was focusing on like the politics.
Does the religion part go into the thing with the Allspark and those primes?
Yeah, and like the matrix that Prime is supposed to have in his chest, the matrix of leadership that every Autobot leader is supposed to have, and that kind of thing. And they were searching for what was called the Knights of Cybertron, that were supposed to be the original Transformers that left planet and went off into the universe to like,
start new worlds,
to colonize.
Yeah,
essentially.
That makes sense. So then I'll go this way, is that you had talked about before the difference between the matrix of leadership.
Sure.
You said that Hot Rod got that in another...
In the animated movie, the 86 movie with Unicron, Hot Rod ends up with the matrix of leadership and transforms into Rodimus Prime.
Gotcha.
So he goes from being like this cool car with like a fin and fire on the sides and stuff like that into like a Winnebago, because every Prime must be a truck apparently.
Right. Now with that, they've never had Hot Rod in the live actions, correct?
They did have him in one of the later ones. So like they did the first three with Shia LaBeouf, and then they brought in Mark Wahlberg for the fourth one, and then the fifth one as well. And Hot Rod is in the fifth one very briefly. He is what's the guy that was in Silence of the Lambs?
Anthony Hopkins.
He was Anthony Hopkins' car.
Gotcha. Okay.
And like was like his butler, because that's one of the things that's...
So he's kind of a Jarvis for Anthony Hopkins?
That's one of the things that's always kind of weird about the live-action movies, is that, like, they'll give you the name of a guy, but it's not necessarily the same character.
Well, it's like the same thing with RC, where you had when you translate it to...
There were, like, three of them, and they were all motorcycles.
The triplets and motorcycles, and that was all you saw. Like, you didn't get a personality out of RC.
Exactly. And people are kind of already losing their minds, because in the Bumblebee movie, you get to see a character called Wheeljack, and he looks like Wheeljack looked like in the old cartoon. And there's a character in the new movie who has these giant spectacles and turns into like a VW van, and everyone thinks he's supposed to be Wheeljack.
Gotcha.
And like Wheeljack never looked like that. In fact, one movie earlier, he looked exactly like we remember him.
Well, and that was the other gripe too that you had before when we rewatched the second one.
Yeah.
And there was the old World War II plane.
Yeah, Jetfire.
And I love that character as the live action character, and it frustrates you.
It does, because Jetfire was super cool in the cartoons and the comics. The original Jetfire, like, he was a white and red jet. He was actually, the original toy was a Robotech toy that the original toy line is fascinating too, because it's essentially, over in Japan, they started making these things that would turn into robots, whether it was a jet or a gun and there was all these different companies making all these different things that turned into robots, and Hasbro got a hold of them and licensed like a dozen different lines of these things and called them all Transformers, and then handed them to Marvel and said, make us a reason why these things all go together. Because Marvel a year earlier had done that when they relaunched G.I. Joe, from being the like action figures that were like this big, like the Mego figures, to the ones that were in the 80s that were like Star Wars guys. because they'd seen that Kenner had so much success with Star Wars figures, selling hand over fist Star Wars figures. They're like, we need to do that with GI Joe. So they did that. They like, we're gonna come out with, here's 12, there are 6 or 12 dudes, GI Joe dudes. Here's their names. Give us backstory. Give us a comic book. Give us a reason. Give us an enemy, kind of for them to fight, kind of thing. And Marvel built all of that for them. And they're like, okay, here's Transformers. What is it and why?
Well, you had that when we were going through some of the ones that you do have, they've got you had this other car that was made by a third party.
Yeah.
It was that blue, I think it was like bluish black or something. So what is the background on that, and how are they able to make other things that are supposed to be Transformers but aren't really?
It's been a weird gray area for the last, I'd say like 20 years, where they can, for one thing, when they made Optimus Prime in the Classics line for the first time, he didn't come with a trailer.
Yeah.
So originally people were like, well, we can make a trailer, and we don't, as long as we don't say it's Optimus Prime's trailer, everyone knows what Optimus Prime's trailer looks like. As long as we don't put an Autobot symbol on it, then like we can sell these and make sure that they go with the figure. And it was the same thing with Hot Rod. The first Hot Rod, I had a trailer that had a bunch of pieces you could put on top of him, so he turned into Rodimus Prime. And that was a thing. Like, I spent maybe $100 on this third-party trailer, so my Hot Rod could be Rodimus Prime. And then a couple of years ago, they finally gave me a cartoon-accurate Rodimus Prime from Hasbro, and I'm like, okay, you finally got around to it. I'll take that guy and sell off my third-party trailer.
I'll offload that.
Yeah, I'll see if somebody will buy that off me. So yeah, it is a very strange. It's funny because I've still got certain ones that are just third-party versions of some of my favorite characters, like Cliff Jumper, and as long as they don't call him Cliff Jumper, they get away with it.
Hey, that works.
It'll be like Mountain Hopper or something.
Well, it's different because there's so many different things that are out there that people try to bootleg, and it's hard to see. And like things that come to mind was friend of the show, Tim, has a collection of random bootleg things.
He certainly does.
Also into Transformers, but he's got I bought him a bootleg CM Punk that I found, which was just a John Cena, but somebody repainted it.
Yep.
He's got like a really weird Mario that does not look correct, and it's very uncomfortable. It's like Uncanny Valley, but with Mario.
Yep.
So do you feel like some of the releases that they have with the Transformers, do they look really spot on, or are there so many differences that they're not really flagged for that?
So that's always the fascinating thing, is that especially when the comics that I was talking about, that were delving into like the religion and the politics of Transformers, the designs in those comics are not exactly the designs of any specific toy that we had come to recognize. So a lot of third-party companies would make versions of, say, Starscream that look like his IDW comic book version, as opposed to, there was a point in the IDW comic book where Megatron was like a stealth jet instead of a gun, and it took Hasbro about 5 years to get a stealth jet Megatron out. Within that time frame, there were like a dozen third-party stealth jet Megatrons that you could get. And the really funny thing is that at one point, it fed back into itself, in that there was a character that hadn't been in the comics in a long time, and he was on the cover of one of the comics, and the version that was on the cover was one of the third-party versions. Because Hasbro had not given them a, like, hey, we're going to make this guy, and this is what he's going to look like. So they're like, well, we want Huffer in the book, but they haven't made a Huffer in probably a decade and a half, so just do that one. It looks good. The artist just drew that one, and I don't know that they got into trouble for it or anything, but
that's pretty funny though.
Yeah.
And then I'm gonna boil this one down to the last question, because we've been going for about 20 minutes in this segment. I don't know if I don't know where our level is yet. Yeah. But last question: where did they lose you with the Michael Bay movies?
Where did they lose me?
Yes, or have they lost you? Because we're still gonna see them regardless. But
that's the thing, is that like I think I said when the Super Bowl ad came out that they're gonna have to do a lot of work to make me pay $7 or more at the theater to go and see this new movie. But I feel like by the time it hits, I'll be ready to spend the money to go to the theater and see it. But my hopes aren't very high. My hopes are pretty low, and part of that is that um, after the first movie, like the second movie really changed some stuff like Jetfire. Jetfire not specifically, but like there's the construction vehicles that all turn into the one big dude Devastator. And they used like the wrecking balls as his testicles, and that was unnecessary. Like Devastator doesn't have testicles. And there was another character that I was kind of fan of that was called Skids, and he was paired up with Mudflap to be the ice cream car, and they're both like very racist stereotypes.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like, that was where it started to be like, I don't know. And then the third movie came out, and I don't even remember what stuff in that I didn't like, but I was like, I don't know.
Yeah, so for context a little bit here is that I only know a bit about movies and then what I've absorbed living with this guy.
Sometimes I'll have the cartoons on in the background.
Exactly.
And you'll be like, oh, that looks cool.
Or,
What's that?
or listening to you and Tim talk about stuff.
For sure.
They'll sometimes play robots together. They do not bash them together.
We do not, but sometimes it's so funny. So my friend Tim, who will be on the show eventually,
yes.
and I'm sure we'll talk about Transformers. It'll be a second part to this particular conversation. But Tim will get new robots. He spends more on them than I do, but he'll get new robots and then just pack them up and bring them over. And we'll just sit on the floor in the living room, and I'll transform robots that I've never gotten to transform before, and then show him some of my guys that he may not have bought. And it's hilarious. It's funny because I'm in my 40s, he's in his 30s, and we're not like doing voices and like making up stories or anything like that. We're just like, this is fun.
Look how this transforms. You want to transform mine? Here you go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Look how cool the car mode is.
So, like, I absorb some things I hear them talking about.
Yeah.
But when it comes to it, it's like my knowledge base is like the first couple Transformers movie and Bumblebee. And then we tried to watch the Mark Wahlberg versions, and those are atrocious.
Yeah, we watched the first Mark Wahlberg one, and then the second one we saw the end of while he was at the hospital a month or two ago.
That was
clicking through it. It was on Sci-Fi. I'm like, oh, well, look at this.
Well, we watched the first one when you had already hit, like, I think we watched that one the day that you had the first panic attack, too, and that was one of those things where we're like, maybe we shouldn't be watching this. This sucks. This is depressing, you know? But, you know, when I watch the movies and stuff like that, I feel like I got lost right after the Patrick Dempsey one, because he had the third one. That's the third one. They're in Chicago. He's got the new girlfriend.
Yep.
That they have no explanation of where Michaela went, really. Nope. It's just all of a sudden he's got this even hotter girlfriend than before.
Yeah.
And you're like, what happened here? And there's just a lot of loss of continuity. When they did do the Mark Wahlberg versions, I did see some of the set and have photos of those. That might be something I can release on the Instagram account, because you guys might find that interesting. But it's interesting to see how it touches so many different people, because with like the cars and stuff like that, Chevy dealerships had Camaros with the racing stripe again, with the yellow, and people were buying them because they wanted a Bumblebee car. And you do see semis on the road that are painted as Optimus Prime. We saw one, and he like freaked out while he was driving.
And then we followed him.
It was amazing. And it brings so much joy to the point of, like, even when you go to Universal Studios, they have a Transformers section. You can go and talk to Megatron, and you can stand in line and meet Optimus Prime and Bumblebee, which I did for him and made him cry.
That's what you need to post on social media, is the video you got for me.
I stood in line for almost a half hour to talk to Optimus Prime and Bumblebee, and they made it worth my while.
It was
so. I will share that as well. But it's interesting to see something that has this much longevity I say that knowing like that comic books are out here and you have people that have been fans of certain bands for a while, but to be a fan of something that is so intricate as that has so much of a cult following still is really interesting overall.
It'll be interesting to me as I get older to see what the generations after me, like say your generation or the generation after you, what cultural touchstones, what cartoons, are they going to have such a big nostalgia for, that when somebody of that age group has the money to make a movie or to do a thing, like what is going to result? What are they going to? Is Avatar: The Last Airbender 20 years from now going to get like a live action movie series or like a Netflix series done by somebody who grew up watching Avatar: The Last Airbender?
Well, considering that they already had, like, they've done the Cowboy Bebop
Right.
remake and stuff like that, even though it didn't necessarily do the best,
Right.
it still happened. It's back to what you said before, like, I'm alive at a time where they're
Where there was
redoing
live
this.
action Cowboy Bebop.
Or
Like, that's awesome.
we were really, really into Nope.
Yeah.
And seeing the Akira slide done
So
in
good.
live action is one of the biggest cinematic things
So
that, like,
cool.
so geeky if you know what it is,
Yeah.
but
I had to make you watch Akira so you could see the original slide.
yes, exactly. Like, I had heard about him wanting to do that for so many years, and I knew of it, but I'd never physically seen it. So to see those things, and now you have like the newer cartoons of Transformers
Yep.
with Danny Pudi as
Bumblebee. Yep.
which is hilarious. Things like that. I feel like it's going to continue for years, but it's interesting to see somebody as a day one fan essentially go through their entire life and still have the love and affinity for it.
Yeah. And with that being said, there are definitely like eras of Transformers that I have very little affinity for, like all the ones with turned into beasts that are going to be in this new movie. That's like after my time, and I wasn't interested in cars that didn't turn in, or robots that didn't turn into cars.
Yes.
It's like, and then eventually, like in the early 2000s, they went back to turning into cars, and I was like, "This cartoon ain't for me. I'm in my 20s now, or I'm in my 30s, and like this ain't. This is for kids and good. As long as we can continue to foster in children the idea that that car could turn into a big alien robot and punch another robot in the face, then
You'll be happy.
I'm on board. Just keep it alive.
All right, awesome. So you wanted to introduce a new segment
I
at
do.
the end of this.
So I've got a segment that I'd like to introduce right here at the beginning of Really Big Fan Pod, and it's called "What Did We Learn?" So I've got just 3 questions to ask you about Transformers. They may have been covered while we were talking. They may not have been covered while we were talking. So you're just going to have to give me your best guess.
We just have to see if I know it or not.
Just see if you know. Just see what have you learned. So the first question, I think this might be kind of a softball, is what was Transformers first? Was it a cartoon? Was it a comic? Was it a toy line? Where did Transformers start?
I think you said that it started as a toy first, and then they built it around the toy.
That is correct.
Which, if you wouldn't have said that today, I wouldn't have known that.
Right.
That definitely, I would have guessed the cartoon first.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice job. Nice job.
Okay.
All right. The second one is a true-false question. So you're going to have to probably make your best guess here. They once made transforming toys that went from robot to rock.
False.
That is actually true.
What?
So while Hasbro was making Transformers, I think it might have been Mattel was making GoBots. And GoBots had a line of GoBots called Rock Lords that turned into rocks.
This is why GoBots are the Kmart Transformers. Literally a pet rock.
It's a rock. They're the Rock Lords.
Oh, Lord.
All right. I've got one more for you.
All right.
And this is so I'm going to give you 4 names of 4 Transformers.
Okay.
One of them is not a real Transformer.
Okay.
And you have to figure out which one it is.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Bombshell, Soundwave, Power Wash, Cliff Jumper. One of these things is not like the other.
Repeat one more time.
Bombshell, Soundwave, Power Wash, Cliff Jumper.
I'm going between Bombshell and Power Wash, but I'm not sure which one it is.
Yeah.
I know that does sound.
Cat Black in the chat trying to give you help.
Power Wash does sound jank, but it sounds jank enough that they might have actually done it.
Right.
I feel like, yeah, like I feel like Power Wash has to be it, but Bombshell's my close second.
Power Wash is not real.
Okay, cool.
Power Wash is not real.
Power Wash is jank. I could totally see them making a Power Wash, though, and then it turns into a squirt gun.
That's what I was going to say. Like, what would Power Wash be?
He would be a squirt gun.
That would be
and they
pretty
would
good.
actually put a little bit in there to where you could fill it with just a teeny bit of water so you could squirt someone with it.
Yeah, Bombshell is an Insecticon. Soundwave is the cassette player. Cliff Jumper, obviously, my favorite.
I remember the two. I remembered Soundwave and Cliff Jumper, and I know it's not those two.
Nope, I knew those were the easy ones.
Bombshell, I couldn't remember if I had heard of before or not, and then I was just like, Power Wash
was so insane.
Yeah.
Hopefully, that's what you would guess, and that's what you did. So you were 2 for 3.
Woo!
Not bad.
Not bad. It's rubbed off on me.
Not bad at all.
Much like wrestling, I can't escape it if I tried.
It's true. All right, we're going to take a short break. We're going to come back with our last segment where we're going to tell you what is giving us a hit of serotonin this week on the Really Big Fan Podcast. So what's the schedule again?
So we're going to do the recording on Wednesday.
Right.
We're going to drop the YouTube version on Thursday as a premiere at 8 o'clock. So if you want to watch this and see the emotions happening physically and see my really cool office that I decorated,
it is really cool.
You can catch it as a premiere at 8 p.m. EST on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/reallyBigFanPod. And we will also be setting up some stuff on my site in the section. I haven't pulled it all together yet, but I'm going to make sure that the episodes are accessible. Cool. So we're going to have those. And then the real podcast should drop Friday
mornings.
Yeah, is that doable for you, production master?
I think so. I think you give me like tonight and tomorrow to piece it together. I should be able to do that.
Awesome. Okay, yeah, so that's what we're looking at. So we have a 3-tiered situation where you can always catch it, and then we'll be sharing them to all of our socials. Right. So obviously, find us on all of those. You can pick those up at acronymis.com/reallyBigFanPod. If you need to spell my name, ACRONYMIS. It's acronym is, not acronymis, and not acronomicon, and all of the other things that people have called me.
All right, so this is our final segment for the episode for the week. It is the thing that's giving us a hit of serotonin this week. I'll start, if you don't mind, this week.
Go
because
for it.
The thing that's been giving me a hit of serotonin for probably the last month or so is Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I've actually been streaming it on our Really Big Fan Pod Twitch stream, and just really digging in and having a blast. It is a huge game with so much to do. I beat the game last week, and I still have, I don't know, probably in the neighborhood of like 10 hours worth of things to do without even getting downloadable content for it next. I can't imagine what the new game, which comes out next month, is going to be like, and like I'm not even looking at that game for a year, because I need people to find the stuff and then put it online where I can just Google search when I'm lost. Like, what am I supposed to do next? And
the stamps and everything were really big help for you.
Yeah. You
were going through, and before the stream was happening, he was going through and stamping the maps on where all of the Clorox seeds were. I keep calling them Clorox seeds, even though I know that's not what it is.
Seeds. Link needs to wash his clothes.
Yes, exactly.
Clorox seeds.
But I saw him doing the map. I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah. I'm doing my homework. I haven't had to do homework on a game like this since probably World of Warcraft. It was wild. But it was also, like, thankfully, I've had the time to actually do the homework. And I think that's a big reason why I've gotten to actually enjoy the game, is because my workload is a little bit lighter lately, and I got to play it, and it was totally worth it, to the point where I started thinking about it, and I shared a graphic on my Facebook that had the logos of all these games, and they're like, pick 3, no explanation. And I was looking at it, and I actually had to admit that, like, I think the Legend of Zelda series as a whole is very solid. Like, I cannot remember playing a single Zelda game and not enjoying myself.
So you think you had a better time with the Zelda series overall than you did the Final Fantasy series?
I think so, because I can
Wow.
think of I can think of a couple of Final Fantasies that like were kind of stinkers. It was
You
the
mean
same.
the one you were playing in the bedroom?
Yeah, I gotta finish. That's 13, and I gotta finish that game.
That game
But
sucks.
but like I don't, yeah, because another series that was in there was Persona, and
Yeah.
Persona wouldn't exist if Final Fantasy didn't exist. But I feel like I've had a better time on the whole with the Persona series games that I've played than, like, I've played some great Final Fantasies. There are a couple Final Fantasies that are still going to be the best games I've ever played ever, like the Super Nintendo ones specifically. But at the same time, there's also been ones that I'm like, I can't wait to get through this. I can't believe this game is still going on. So yeah, Breath of the Wild, still enjoying it, still loving it. Great game. If you, it's got to be, it's the game that came out when the Switch came out as like the system seller, which usually you think like there's got to be a Mario game, right? But no, Zelda was the game that came out kind of with the Switch, and even 7 years later, like if you own a Switch, you need to own Breath of the Wild.
Dig it, I dig it. As for me, I'm going to go on the music side of things for today. And before I left to go get my coffee, I brought up to Chuck, I realized, as a person that really loved Nirvana, Kurt Cobain died in 1994 today, and didn't realize how close it was to your birthday, and he was like one of your favorites.
Yep.
And this has been something that's been going on with me for weeks now, where my hyper focuses, and we call them hyper focuses because we're 99% sure I have ADHD at this point.
Yeah.
My hyper focus has been 90s music in the rock genre, but also just in general. There was a podcast that he came across called 60 Songs That Explain the 90s, and he brought it up to me. Then he played me part of the Smashing Pumpkins episode while he was taking me to drop off my car. And when I got my car, I got in the car and pulled up the episode at the exact moment I missed and kept going. And that's when you know I'm really hooked on something, that I went through and pulled all that effort. But for months now, I've been like adding different 90s music to playlists and diving more into 90s rock in general and the grunge side of things.
I have not heard Belly's Feed the Tree as much in my entire life as I had the last 3 months.
Yes.
It's wild.
I have 2 playlists on my Spotify account, and one of them is called Grungy, and then the other one is called Doll Parts. And so the grungy one has more of like the grunge-esque like classics that you're going to come across, the Pearl Jams, the Nirvanas, all that stuff. And then on the Doll Parts one, it's more like Dinosaur Jr. and REM, and like things that didn't necessarily, like, they're from the same era, but they're not as hard. They're not as, and not as cliche in the sense of like I'm not going to hear Local H when there's 20 Pearl Jam songs,
right.
And you even said so yourself when you heard part of that playlist. You're like, you were always hearing like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, all that, and you weren't hearing like some of the other stuff that's on there. But right. I do have things in there from like Bad Season and like stuff like that you just don't always catch. So for me, that's been kind of my itch lately is just grunge and 90s rock, because I feel like right now there's a resurgence going on with, I keep calling it the emo-lution, because all of my emo bands are coming back into style, and so people are now really invested in, hearing new Fall Out Boy, hearing new My Chemical Romance and everything else. And even though those are very much part of my age as a millennial, there was a good period of time when I was in high school where like somebody gave me the Nirvana box set.
Yeah.
And I went through all of it and got really obsessed. And as I had that conversation with you about Kurt dying, and then I left and I was listening to Nirvana, and I was sitting there thinking to myself, like, would I be as invested in Nirvana had I not been introduced with it as like the lead singer is dead,
right?
And it was a very sad reason, and everything else. And you see these resurgences on streaming services of people that like they die and immediately their streams go up.
Right.
Not to bring the stream down and make you feel sad or anything, but
no,
like
it's the same thing with record sales.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me how those things come through. And would we be celebrating Kurt Cobain in his death if it hadn't been so tragic? And would the music be as elevated as it is? So these are just kind of things that I poke around with in my own little nerd brain. But overall, I've introduced myself into, like, some music that I wasn't really open to before, wasn't super listening to before. I mean, like, I actually know lyrics to a Local H song other than Bound for the Floor Now. That's crazy to me.
Right, or you know, like, Dinosaur Jr. is definitely a pull from the 90s that, like, they didn't, there was one hit, maybe two. So to start listening to it is it's when I was in high school. So like I'm like, this is great.
And this is much better than my hair metal phase, right?
Much better.
Yes. You can blame James Gunn for giving me the Peacemaker soundtrack because I was torturing him with it for probably 2 months.
Right.
So now we're on to the grunge stuff, and I'm learning more about different things. And obviously, like I say, the podcast. If you want to check out a good podcast that's not us, check out 60 Songs That Explain the 90s from Rob Harvilla. Really good. It talks about not just, you know, rock music, but it goes across all genres. There was a great episode on DMX and talking about all of the stuff that had gone on with him. You have funny episodes talking about, like, Guns N' Roses with November Rain. That one, if you want to listen to anything and laugh, that would be the one I would suggest. So
is that podcast your...
I think 90s grunge and 90s music just overall, just 90s music in general right now is really fueling my soul. Oh, so I feel like that's where I'm at right now, is that it's a little bit more of a broad topic, but I feel like overall, I don't know what else I'd be listening to right now. You know, I'm not really that enthusiastic about new stuff. I will listen to something new when it drops to see if I like it, but beyond that, I go right back to listening to that stuff, and I feel like Smashing Pumpkins was kind of the gateway to that more so, because I went through like a very big binge of Smashing Pumpkins that kind of led me to this. So yeah, 90s music is good.
Was that box set your first Nirvana experience?
No, I had already had mixed CDs, and I had the Black Nirvana album.
Bleach.
No, just the Nirvana self-titled.
Oh, yeah, it's the greatest hits one with, you know, you're right. Okay,
so I had that first.
I was just thinking how wild it would be if, like, your first exposure to Nirvana was with the Lights Out box set.
I listened to 89X. There's no way that could have been my first.
No, not at all.
My first exposure to Nirvana.
Right.
But somebody had a copy. Like, somebody had gotten 2 of them for, like, a birthday, Christmas, something or other. And they're like, well, like, at that point, people weren't going to record stores as much anymore. Like, Harmony House was dying at this point, so it's not like you could have gone and sold it somewhere. So yeah, right there. So I ended up with this box set from somebody in my Spanish class, and then got in an argument with said person because I was very much of the opinion that Courtney Love had something to do with that death at that time. I was one of those.
Yeah, when I was still in high school, I definitely felt that, like, that's shady.
I feel like that's probably internalized misogyny at this point.
I think so.
That we all kind of blamed Courtney for that, and
it's part of something that's like such a tragedy like that too. Like, you want there to be a reason, you want there to be an answer, and the older we get, the more we realize there isn't.
Yeah, especially with both of us. I mean, obviously, this podcast is stemming from us having more space and time because we've both had some mental health challenges in the past, and now we're trying to do better for ourselves and straighten some of that out, and that means, you know, finding time for the things that matter, and that's what we're doing here overall. So I feel like, you know, that's part of the reason why this podcast is existing too, not to close it out on a weird note, but I feel like this is existing because we want to celebrate things that are good and not always be consumed. A lot of the stuff that's going on online right now and everything else is really hard to swallow, and there's a lot of sadness and a lot of hate and a lot of other things, and we want to bring out some of the things that are positive and the things that are good. So I feel like that's where we're going with this overall.
And that's kind of why we didn't bring up WrestleMania at all, because night 1 was great. Night 2, not so much.
Yep. I feel like WrestleMania really brought us to a space where we realized, like, we got tricked again. We were really, really pumped, and we got pushed up, and we got what we wanted with Sammy and Kevin.
It's really unfortunate because we had so good a time Saturday night.
Mm-hmm. Saturday night was amazing.
Sunday was so not what we had expected for years, but had not wanted. And then Monday was just a fart in church, man.
Exactly. So we weren't going to talk about that too much today, but it definitely is something that'll come up, I'm sure, in the future with a wrestling person.
Yeah, as the weeks go by, I'm sure we'll talk about wrestling. I'm sure, they just sold WWE to Endeavor, which also owns the UFC. So it's going to be, if you thought last year as a wrestling fan was wild news-wise, I think it's only going to get wilder.
Yeah.
I think this year's only going to be crazier.
We'll definitely see what happens there. I have a feeling that's it. Maybe that should be our other segment. It's like we have our serotonin, and then we have the fart in church segment.
Fart in church, yeah, like this didn't work.
This didn't work this week. WrestleMania did not work this week.
Yeah. Well, with that being said, I want to invite you guys to follow us on social media. You can follow us on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. Where else can they find us? TikTok.
Yeah.
It's all
Facebook,
at
Twitter,
really
Instagram, YouTube
at Really Big Fan Pod. That's where you can find us on Twitch as well. We like to stream games on this channel as well as doing the podcast on Wednesday afternoons. And you can find us over on Patreon at Really Big Fan Pod, and that is important because that is where if you can support this endeavor, we can do it for a long, long time.
We've got a couple people already that have contributed, and just a little bit helps. If you can even only contribute $1 a month, that would be great for us. You never know how much that will help, even just to, take care of some of the things that we have to purchase, whether that be, adding better graphics and whatnot, and cameras and stuff like
whatever,
that.
Whatever we need in order to make this show the show that not only we want to do, but you want to hear.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
We really appreciate Cat Black being in the chat for our first
Woo-woo!
stream on Twitch. And we really appreciate you listening right now for downloading the podcast. And we hope you'll come back next week for the Really Big Fan Pod.